Mel Tran, thank you so much for joining me for an episode of Remarkable Insights. I would love to start by asking you to introduce yourself and anything that you would like our audience to know about how you choose to identify.
Thank you, Viv. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here today and to spend a bit of time with you. My name is Mel. I go by pronouns of she, her. I am a designer by trade. I work as a design manager at a consulting firm called Nous, and I work specifically in the digital design and data practice. My background is more from a user experience and product development designer. Yeah, I'm sure we would dive deeper into this as we go.
We will. I would love to kind of unpack and learn about the beginning of your journey where you started to really want to explore the intersection of disability and tech and design.
Wanted to start off as an industrial designer, so I approached one of the universities here in Sydney, one of the main and well-known universities, and I met with the program coordinator, and I asked him, would you be able to modify the course, given that half of the course required some hands-on work? And then he went on and said, look, I've had multiple people like you enroll in that course over the years and they've all dropped off halfway because they just realized it was just too difficult for them. And then he sort of said, in my opinion, I think someone like you should do something like law because all you have to do is move your mouth. It's move your mouth. So as you can tell, that conversation went down very well. And I found the digital media course at Torrens University, and I think I sat down and I had the same conversation with the program director, and I said to him, do you think I would be able to do this course? And he said, well, if you're referring to academic-wise, I don't know, because I've literally just met you. But if you're referring to the physical aspect, yes, we may have to make some adjustments, but we are a design school after all, so it's our job to be creative. It taught me to see that things don't always work the way it should, or it doesn't always work the way it could. But as designers, as individuals, it's our job to find innovative ways to make things work.
I love that. And I know that you have previously described disability as a force of innovation in your role as a UX designer. And I wonder, do you have any examples of how that has been the case?
Great question. I think one example, I think that we all have a shared global collective experience of is probably the global pandemic. And I know this word has been thrown around many, many times over the last few years, and it's still somewhat the center of our conversations. But I think it's easy to relate to once we've all gone through in a collective period of challenges and uncertainty and change. And I think that's the same principle applies to disability. I think as a person with a disability, you constantly face challenges with everyday living activities, accessing, and just society in general. There's always challenges and barriers that in a way for personally it forces me to think differently.
And this idea of, as a UX designer and understanding the critical importance of user feedback, what do you think a good practice of user feedback looks like?
Oh, great question. I think the first and foremost kind of principle that I hold very closely is empathy. And I think that travels through from the very beginning of designing and developing a solution right through to the very end. Good practice is when you pause before you jump into solution mode, before you even define the problem, because I think to solve the problem, you need to first understand the problem. And you won't understand the problem unless you speak to people, unless you understand the needs, the motivations, the behaviors, the attitudes. Um, Once you have an understanding of the problem, and that comes with collecting unique perspectives, that's when you can start shifting into the solution mode. And once again, this entire process is and should be driven by collective experiences as well as unique perspectives.
And what do you think is maybe the biggest misconception in the work you do about disability and technology?
Technology is an enabler and it plays such a huge role in the disability sector, not only to support and improve the daily living, like we all rely on technology and it has played such a huge role in our lives with or without a disability. But I think when disability is added to the equation, technology becomes a very powerful enabler and a catalyst for change, for more positive social change, which isn't always seen as the case. And I think if you see it from this perspective, you'll see disability from a social model rather than just a pure medical model where it's just passive recipients of support.
And what's a piece of advice you would give to any product designers or UX designers who are trying to design um, genuinely accessible and inclusive and equitable solutions from the get-go? What is one piece of advice you would give to them?
It's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to fail because that's how we learn. But I think also it's okay to be bold and to be brave and to try new things and to not shy away from a challenge that may be deemed too difficult or too hard to solve.
I think it's such a great point. Particularly, I've heard it before where people say they're new to the disability space and they don't know where to start. And so it scares them to ask questions about ways they can improve or, just start learning because they're worried they will get it wrong. And is that something that you have experienced firsthand about working with designers and asking them to be more aware of accessibility in the design?
Absolutely. I think I did a bit of both extremes. I'll get I've had experiences where I'll have people who flat out say, I haven't had any experience in the disability sector before. I haven't done any work or haven't don't have anyone in my network with a disability. It just seems very complicated and hard. So I've always put it in a too hard basket. And then you get conversations with people from the other extreme who they will say, I haven't had any experience with people with disability before or the disability sector in general, but I am curious and I want to learn. Forgive me if I ask questions that may seem ignorant, but I want to learn. So please tell me and I will ask. And I think as designers, we are inherently curious people. We ask questions, we probe, and we find out I think it's in our nature to ask questions, to probe, and to use that curiosity that we have to build, to live, and to use that as a way to get more creative and to get more innovative. And I think that's the starting point. Channel the inner curiosity and ask questions.
So great. And at the end of these conversations, I like to ask our guests to leave people who've been enjoying the episode with a remarkable insight. In your case, it could be a piece of advice about design or anything that you would like people to continue to think about.
I think the one piece of insight that I would like to leave, or key takeaway, is that challenges and barriers drive innovation. And I'm not just talking about disability, it is in a much more broader context in terms of we all have our own stories. We all have challenges and barriers that we face on a daily basis. And rather than, and I think those challenges and the unique perspectives and lived experiences can become very powerful drivers and catalysts for change if you let it. And if you are open to having that, going on that transformative journey, and technology and innovation are enablers that would help get you there.